In today's math lesson, we're going to review a little bit about fractions from the last lesson, as well as continue to talk a little bit more about the different pieces in a fraction and how we would label a fraction. You can see here on the screen that I have a circle, and I also have some words. I have the word numerator, and I also have the word denominator. We talked about these last lesson. Numerator is always the top number, denominator is always the bottom number, and I told you that denominator has that letter D at the beginning, same as the word down, so I told you that was a way that you could try and remember where the denominator would be. Now, the more important thing is, what do these numbers stand for? What does the top number stand for? What does the bottom number stand for? So as a review, with this circle, you can see here, half of it is yellow, the other half is white. I have a total of 2 pieces, so I could label these. I got 1, 2 pieces, so that tells me that it is halves. Now let's talk about what's the numerator and denominator mean. The number 1 on top, so the top number, this is important, the top number always tells you how many pieces are colored in. So you can see I have 1 yellow piece colored in, that's why we have the number 1 on top. Now the bottom number, 2, tells us how many pieces there are possible, or how many pieces are there in our whole. So if we consider this circle as a whole, we would say that there are a total of 2 pieces. Now let's practice some more of this and talk a little bit more about it. Here are a couple other shapes I already explained are half. Now let's talk about fourths. You can see here that I've got the number 3 on top for my numerator, and the reason it's 3 is because I have a total of 3 pieces colored in, and I can see that by going 1, 2, and 3. So you can see there again, the top number always tells us how many pieces are colored in. The bottom number tells us how many pieces there are possible altogether. So again, 3 pieces colored in out of a total possible of 4. One thing to point out before we move on is that some of the times you will see fractions where the top number is stacked right over the bottom number, or you might see it where you have a number and then kind of a slanted line, like a line's falling over, and then the other number. They mean the same exact thing. Just a lot of times, for example, if I was typing on a computer, you might see a fraction where you give the number that's for the top, then you have that line that's kind of fallen over, and then you have your bottom number. So this fraction that I just made is still the same thing as 1/2 or 1 out of 2. It's just that sometimes on a computer or sometimes you just can't stack those numbers on top. So let's move on and talk about how we can label each piece of fraction. So you can see here I've got a rectangle. And now what I'm going to do is I want to talk about how we could label each and every piece. Now this is really important because this is going to be something that you're going to have to know as we continue to talk about fractions in first grade and in second grade and on up through high school. You'll need to know what each piece needs to be labeled. So again, talking about a fraction, remember the top number of a fraction, so this box will represent where the top number would go. The top number is always how many pieces would be colored in, and the bottom number tells us how many pieces there can be total. So if you look at this shape over here, this rectangle, the first thing I want to do is figure out what would my bottom number be. So if I was thinking about what would my bottom number be, I have to think how many pieces are there. Well, I have 1, 2, and then I have 3 pieces. So my bottom number on all of these is going to be 3 because we have 3 pieces possible. So now the one problem is to figure out what's that top number going to be. Now, to show that each piece of this fraction is equal, what we're going to do is we're just going to show that this top piece right here is 1 piece out of the 3. The middle piece is still 1 piece out of the 3, and then the bottom piece is still 1 out of 3. We're going to show that each piece is just 1 piece out of how many would be 3. So we labeled this fraction as 1 out of 3. Now if we have the circle, again, the first thing you're going to do is figure out what's your bottom number. So the bottom number is always going to be how many pieces there are. So if I look, we have 1, 2, 3. So my bottom number in all of these is going to be 3. And then since we're going to see how much this piece is worth down here at the bottom, there's only 1 piece here at the bottom, so that'd be 1 piece out of 3. Same thing with this piece kind of on the side, that's 1 piece out of the 3 possible. And then another one, this last piece on the right, would be 1 out of 3. Now we're going to continue practicing labeling each piece of a fraction, or each piece of the whole. So you can see here I have a big rectangle. I've already drawn the lines in the middle to kind of save some time so that we can see what number would go on the bottom and then what we would label the top. So first thing I want to do is I need to figure out, well, how many pieces are there total in my whole? So I want you guys to think in your head and count with me. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So what I would need is I would need the number 8 on the bottom of every single one of these. So by putting that number 8 at the bottom, that tells me that we have a total of 8 pieces in our whole. So this rectangle has a total of 8 pieces. Now to think about, what do I need to put on the top? Since this is 8 on the bottom, what I need to do is I need to figure out what number goes on top. So again, if I went back to this first piece up here, this is only one piece out of 8. The next piece is still, well, one piece out of 8. So I would repeat the thing over and over until I had this whole fraction, or this whole rectangle, labeled with fractions. So each piece is worth 1 out of 8. Now if we look at this next shape over here, we're going to count again. Count with me. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So 6, think in your head, does it go on the top or does it go on the bottom? It goes on the bottom because the bottom number tells us how many pieces we have total. So I'm going to put a 6 underneath because the bottom number again tells us how many pieces there are total. Again, that number is 6 because there's 6 pieces. And then the top number, this little piece right here where my markers move around, would be piece number 1 out of 6. And the same thing would repeat for the rest of them because each piece is only worth 1 out of however many you have. Since this one has 6 total pieces, this piece right here that I just circled is only worth 1 out of 6. The next one is worth 1 out of 6, and so on. Now we've been talking about writing what the fraction would be for each piece. Now we can also take that and practice coloring in what they want us to. So for example, number 1 says color 1/3 of the rectangle, or 1 out of 3. So what that means is it says to color 1 out of the 3 pieces. So to show coloring 1 out of the 3 pieces, I would just color in 1 piece, and that's all it would be because I only colored in 1 of those pieces out of the 3. So that would be coloring 1/3. Now I could do the next fraction. Number 2 says to color 2/3 of the rectangle, or you think of it as 2 out of 3. So in your head I want you to be thinking about how many of these would I color in. So to save some time, I'm just going to put an X to show you how many I would color in. Now if you're thinking, oh, that's wrong, you're right. It's not just one piece. I need a total of 2, which I just highlighted why it needs to be 2 pieces. So again, I'm going to put an X that shows that I need 2 pieces out of the 3 colored in. Now let's look over here of the circle. It says color 2/3 of the circle. So again, since that first number is 2, I want to color in a total of 2 pieces since that top number is 2. Remember, the top number tells us how many pieces we want to color in. The bottom number just tells us how many pieces there are possible. Second part, color in 3/3, or 3 pieces out of the 3. So for this one, I would need to color in 3 pieces out of all 3, and then we would say this is one whole circle that's been colored in. We're going to keep practicing coloring in the fractions here. You can see my number 1 says to color 1/8 of the rectangle. So since it's a 1 on top, that means I only need to color in 1 piece. So this shows that I just colored in 1/8 of this rectangle. Now the next thing says to color in 3/8 of the rectangle, or 3 out of the 8 pieces. So since that top number is a 3, I would need to color in 1, 2. Is that correct? Nope. I need to color in 1 more piece so that I have a total of 1, 2, and 3 pieces. Since the top number is 3, that top number tells us how many pieces need to be colored in. The next one over here for the hexagon, color 2/6 of the hexagon, or 2 out of the 6 pieces. So here's 1 piece colored in, and now here's 2 pieces colored in. That shows me that I got 2 pieces of 6 colored in. And then the last one says 4/6 of this hexagon needs to be colored in. Since that top number is 4, I need to color in 4 pieces. So there's 1 and 2, and I'm done, right? That shows me 4 out of 6. Nope, I need to color in 4 total. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. That would show me that I have 4/6 colored in. To finish our lesson up, you're going to have some time to practice in your practice book to show me how you can label fractions as well as color in certain parts. So question number 1 on your practice book page says, how many equal parts are there? So think of this circle. How many equal parts are there? There's a total of 3 equal parts. And then it says write a fraction in each of the pieces of the circle. So this is one piece out of, again, how many equal pieces is 3. So one piece again out of how many equal pieces would be 3. And then this last piece would be 1 out of a total of 3. And then the last thing says to color 1 out of 3 of the circle. So I would actually take my pencil and color in just 1 out of the 3 pieces. You're going to repeat the same thing on questions 2, 3, and 4. Just pay extra close attention to how many pieces it wants you to color in of your fraction. Good luck!